So Latashri, we can start, or we'll wait for a couple of more minutes. You are the moderator for us as a doctor.
Yes, I guess our 4 minutes have already crossed the 6, so I think we can start.
Okay.
Okay. So
you don't have to worry about.
Can we have the videos on, if possible, some of you?
Sorry.
I'm just requesting people to switch on their videos as much as possible, if possible. Professor Ramesh, your video is not. Professor Bhattacharya cannot see you and cannot hear you also.
Now I can. Now I saw him briefly. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Now you're muted, Professor Ramesh. You're muted.
I was asking, could you recognize me?
How can I ever forget you? All the way from Rohtak. That was 10 years ago. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Very nice to see you. Very nice to see you.
Yeah, same. Very happy to have you with us today.
Yeah, sure. My pleasure.
Okay, over to you, Latashri.
All right. So a very good evening, good morning, and good afternoon to the distinguished speakers, professors, and doctoral scholars participating from different time zones. My name is Latashri. I am a doctoral student at IIM Kozhikode in Strategic Management Department. And I would like to take this opportunity to extend a warm welcome to you all on behalf of the IIM Kozhikode fraternity. Before I invite Professor Rajesh to introduce our first esteemed speaker for this session, I would like to briefly introduce our department to you all. We are a very much research-focused department with the faculty members published in leading academic journals and presented papers during major conferences of Academy of Management, Strategic Management Society, British Academy of Management, and Academy of International Business. Broadly, the faculty members and doctoral students conduct research in areas like strategic planning, business level strategy, strategy implementation, entrepreneurship, international business, diversification, industrial clusters, capabilities, social networks, internationalization of emerging market firms, renewable energy, policy issues and clusters, leveraging resources, business model innovations, and strategic renewal of organizations. And the area plans to increase its research output significantly in the coming years. Our doctoral program alumni are placed in reputed national and international institutes, such as IIM Trichy, IIM Ranchi, XLRI, Lavaro University School of Business, Strathclyde Business School, and Australian National University, and so on. So with this, I would like to invite Professor Rajesh to take forward the session. Thank you so much, Professor Rajesh.
Okay, thank you, Latashri, for this introduction. We are a group of about 10 faculty members and a couple of doctoral scholars that are working in the area of strategy. But for the first session, this program is being organized to actually also talk about research in each of the themes. So there are themes similar to marketing and finance that are going on parallelly. So what we thought was it would be good to have a thematic session around strategy, and especially in the uncertain times that we are in. So I thank our speakers, all of them, Professor W Ramachandran from Indian School of Business, Professor Stephen Jang, and Professor C.P. Bhattacharya from Card School. So for joining, and all of them I thought was different time zones, but incidentally Professor Bhattacharya is in India. Then Professor Stephen Jang, really thank you and appreciate that you're joining us so late from Australia. So thank you very much. And so let's, the first speaker would be Professor W Ramachandran, and he would be, he requires no introduction, at least in the Indian context, because most of us know him and have read him and heard him at multiple places. But nevertheless, it's a privilege to welcome you, sir, to this special session. So Professor Kavil is a founding faculty at Indian School of Business, but he set up at Indian School of Business what is called the Wadhwani Center for Entrepreneurship Development at ISB in 2001. Later, he served as the Associate Dean of Programs before becoming the Thomas Fahey's Chair, Professor of Family Business and Wealth Management. Currently, he is the Executive Director for the Center of Family Business at Family Enterprise at the Indian School of Business. He has specialized in family business, entrepreneurship, and strategy. And in fact, most of us know him as understanding family businesses and family constitution and how families extend wealth and across generation and issues around that. He consults to a lot of these family businesses at India School of Business. And before his stint at ISB, he was with IIM Ahmedabad as a faculty for 15 years prior to joining ISB. And he was just sharing with us that he was there as a faculty from 1986. And I was fortunate to be there in the first year, in the last year of his stint at IIM Ahmedabad as a student. So he's been teaching courses on family business and entrepreneurship for various target groups. More importantly, he served on a member of several national committees of the Department of Science and Technology, Securities and Exchange Board of India, and UPSC. He's on the board of several companies and advises family businesses, growth companies, and development institutions in India and abroad. He's also been associated with the Family Business Network International for several years and has served on advisory committees of even World Bank and Government of India. His latest book, which is one thing which probably attracted me, is the 10 Commandments for Family Business, which has been published by Sage in January 2015. And so with that, sir, let me welcome you once again. And thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Professor Bhattacharya. It's my great pleasure to share some of my thoughts. So thank you very much for inviting me. IIM is very close to my heart, whichever IIM is in, especially when it is a pan-IIM meet. It's a great joy for me to join and share some of my thoughts. So let me share my screen and start from there. So I agreed to share some of my thoughts on the strategic management in uncertain times. And I shall try to share some of the challenges as I have observed as a student of strategy, as a student of family business and entrepreneurship, and some of the research issues that occurred to me. One basic thing is that there is turbulence. Turbulence is going to be there. All around, and there is acceleration in the turbulence in the business environment. If you take any component of the constituent of the environment, you find that technology disruption has been accelerated by COVID, and political polarization, autocracies across the world, instability, then ethnic rivalries, intolerance, social issues. Violence, I mean, within countries, intra-country, inter-country, inter-society, communities. And also another thing in the social side is that the family side, as a student of family business, I have noticed that the concept of family, the concept of home is undergoing huge changes. And these have huge implications for the market, the habits, and everything of life. Then protectionism, we used to talk about globalization, but now it is become globalization is talked about, but practice is more in terms of protectionism and controls directly and indirectly. And you have the tsunami of epidemic, and all these things have also resulted in terms of shorter product life cycle. So what it means is that for somebody who is involved in strategy or thinking about strategy, they have to have a completely new approach to strategy. What it was when I was a student or when I started teaching long ago was that the environment used to be a lot more stable. It is no longer so. So quick and impactful responses so much required now. So if you look at this is about the 4 states of disruption. I've just borrowed it from an HBR article about the volatility and the disruption happening across industries. So you can look at this slides and then see that some of the industries are very, very volatile. If the current level of disruption is high, as well as the susceptibility to future disruption is high. And this is some sort of a projection, but within that itself, there will be changes. So this is essentially to show that the environment from a technology angle is changing rapidly. And if you look at from the Indian context, PwC had done some sort of an analysis of the essential 8 technologies reshaping India's growth story. And which means that it's not that the AI or blockchain or IoT is standalone. These are intertwined, they are interdependent. So directly and indirectly, these are all impacting our life. So even less developed country or developing country or a poor country, these things are embedding. And so therefore, there is a huge impact of these technologies on the business and life of everybody. So therefore, the question is the which path to follow. A strategy maker is affected by this or faced with this challenge of what kind of a path to follow, which is going to take me to success. So here, because the environment is unstable and the internal organization has to be changing. So one important point is that one has to be entrepreneurial. Entrepreneurial because the existing opportunities are dying, or what is perceived to be an opportunity in the near future, maybe there may not be there, but there are new opportunities coming. We have seen it happening in many areas. So my research from early days has shown that there are 2 parts to that. What I found was that customer dissatisfaction is the source of an opportunity. If customers are dissatisfied, there is a huge opportunity lying there. And there are 2 components to that. If the level of criticality of the need is very high, and if the elements of discontent are high, then it is a very high level of dissatisfaction, the right top quadrant. If it is otherwise, it is lower. And this I have tried it out with various industries, various products, various organizations, and found that this makes a lot of sense. And it is dynamic. For instance, if you take Uber was in the high criticality, high discontent quadrant when people started using Uber as a shared, ride provider. For a variety of reasons, Uber became a success, Ola became a success, and because of the need for this kind of a transport mechanism. The moment COVID hit, Uber was out completely, low criticality, low discontent. But at that time, Uber was not into the delivery service. Uber found it as an opportunity. It worked on its own technology, backend support system, and then found that there is a huge need for delivery. And Uber used it, especially in California. And then because of their relationship with Zomato, they started using it in India also. So my basic point is that it's very, very dynamic and very turbulent. So one has to be very, very cognizant of it and change. And I call this the typical traditional value chain where each element is adding value to the customer. I call it as the customer dissatisfaction elimination chain, primarily because an entrepreneur or a businessman or business person is in the business of eliminating dissatisfaction of customers constantly, identifying new areas of dissatisfaction, eliminating. And so any of this link may create an opportunity, may be a source of dissatisfaction. So it is also important for anybody who is either in delivery service or information sharing service to know that what is happening across the value links. So it's also very important. So, which also means that resources have to be managed dynamically. It's not only the dynamic resource management, which has been discussed for at least for the past 10, 20 years, 15, 20 years. It has gathered a new dimension now in the current context, and as the instability is growing. So if you look at it, that reconfiguration of resources and capabilities is very important. And then the question is whether you can acquire these resources or not, whether you want to have it in-house or not. And that's where some of the network effects will be very, very prominent, very, very important. Loose networks or tight coupling, lack of tight coupling will be very, very relevant in the years to come. And also the multi-process excellence is very important. It's a process integration becomes important in a successful business context. So one has to identify and grab the emerging opportunities. So which also means that the processes have to be fine-tuned. The flexibility is is to be there, and response times will be shorter. So given all these things, one of the typical examples I have found is Amazon. I've been noticing, like all of you, when Amazon was a failure in its first year's business, when it came with the online bookstore in '94, it miserably failed during the Christmas season. But then Jeff Bezos learned the reason for it, and he did not eliminate all the sources of dissatisfaction. He addressed that in the next year, and then onwards, he has been growing like anything. So 2019, as recent as this, so he started selling everything. Amazon is selling everything online with offline delivery mechanism. So when they acquired the Whole Foods market in the US. So they have been one of the huge successes of the response to the changing environment proactively. And these are all visible now. You see that they are present in e-commerce, cloud computing, digital streaming, as well as artificial intelligence, and integrating all these in terms of finding new opportunities. So which means that it's a bundle of resources, but finding opportunities all over. So some of the research questions coming out of this situation. One is that how do unicorns grow? How did Amazon grow? Why is it that some of the other unicorns, we have a wave of unicorns in India now, and there is a huge concern that whether all these unicorns are going to retain their valuation or not. Will they be able to build resources? How do they build resources? How are their growth strategies different from their peers? So this is a very interesting area to explore. Yet another is that how do shorter tenure of employees, the average years of service of employees is coming down. It's not only at the lower end, but at the higher end. The commitment to the organization is shrinking. People are committed to their own profession or themselves. So this is affecting the organizations. And how is this going to impact the approaches to building core and unique resources and capabilities? Because a lot of it is dependent on people, and some other research has shown that 75% of the capabilities are intangible. If that's the case, how is it going to affect the resource building strategies of organization when the tenure of employees is coming down? Yet another question is that how is corporate entrepreneurship strategy evolving in the new context? When I was a student, corporate entrepreneurship was seen in one area, but I think that it has changed a lot. And in manufacturing, service business, family and non-family, that's also a very important thing. And I'll just come to this family part of it. And younger and older business, whether it is family or not. So very, very interesting area to explore in terms of research, exactly on this. So who calls the shot in organizations? Theory would say something, but in practice, who calls the shot? Let's look at this, the numbers in India. We have done a study. We have a database on listed companies in India, and we found that 91% of the companies, listed companies, are family controlled with more than 20% holding. So it's only 9% which are non-family controlled. So the dynamics of family relationship, it's very important to understand how the family businesses are formulating their strategies, implementing their strategy, building their resources. So let me also tell you the significance of this. If you look at the ownership structure in these listed companies, we find that the listed companies, the families controlled interest is on an average, it is 48%, and it is climbing. Institutional or other outside non-family interests, their percentage is coming down. So that means that increasingly, the families are holding the reins of strategy. And very often students of strategy forget that there are some other powerful forces behind the organization. It's very important to recognize that and see that. And research can look at the family as well as the non-family aspects of it. And just for this understanding of those who are not too familiar with the family business context, there are three major entities, the family and business. Forget about this owner part. Family is more like affection, tradition, equality, caring, and love and affection. Okay, so it's more like a socialistic society, which means that everything is for everybody, everyone according to his or her might. Whereas business is completely different. Business is logic driven. Hire and fire. If you are good, you have a job. If you are not good, you don't have a job. It's merit based. So here you are trying to combine the socialistic as well as the capitalistic systems in a family business. And if there are people who are overlapping in this area, and if there is another entity owners, there are 7 different stakeholders in here. So if these overlapping areas are getting crowded, there are new forces coming. And these forces, all of these forces have direct, indirect effect on the strategy of an organization. So again, yet another part, I don't want to get into the details of it. Small family business groups in several unrelated businesses. Some of them grow like this with one big business, and several others have multiple large businesses like the Mahindras, like the Godrej or the Murigapas. So there are different whatever it is, combinations of firms within the business groups also. So if I take one example of Reliance, for instance, which went through a split when Dhirubhai passed away between Mukesh Ambani and his brother Anil Ambani, and Mukesh Ambani has grown from success to success. Look at the strategy of growth of Mukesh Ambani, and Mukesh Ambani has been shifting the focus from the manufacturing traditional business to more of the new gen businesses of late. This is one part of it. So this is actually the group companies of the Reliance. Reliance is there all over, and they have huge competition. Amazon is in terms of e-commerce. There are each area. For instance, Byju's is there in online education. So any area you touch, Reliance is there. Reliance is becoming all powerful, all omnipresent in the Indian context. How is it going to affect the strategy of the other organization? How is Reliance going to formulate its own growth strategy in any of this? Whether the classic principles of resource allocation apply there or not? Interesting questions. So this is yet another picture of the Reliance. So Reliance, if you take it, the GeoNet, this is a MyGeo group. That it means that within that itself, there are very many areas that Geo has grown. And similarly, they have a relationship with multiple Facebook, WhatsApp, and others. And so therefore, this is another type of network evolving between large corporations within the country and across the country. So some of the research questions emanating from these areas. So one is that how do family-controlled businesses formulate strategies? It's not studied yet. It's not studied in a very systematic way. Most business schools, whether in India or outside, have focused only on the traditional approaches, traditional functional areas and strategy. I think it is time for all of us to move forward. And that's what we have been trying to do at ISB, that if most of the businesses are controlled by families, and one has to take cognizance of it and research from that angle. What is unique about the group restructuring strategies of traditional businesses like the Reliance? It is constantly restructuring, and the pandemic has become an opportunity for Mukesh Ambani. And what about the new generation businesses? How are they restructuring? Are they restructuring? Are they exiting? Or are they building together? Between family and non-family businesses. That's also yet another area. And what are the implications of the current turbulence to the value migration strategies of organizations? That's yet another area worth exploring. Yet another area is that how has technology-led disruptions and environmental turbulence that are present now affected the composition and functioning of corporate boards? Have corporate boards changed, or whether they are the same people or not? The skill set required at the board level is different. The governance quality is quite different. So are they restructuring or not? Are the board processes changing? So that's yet another interesting area. So strategy making in uncertain times, I was speaking to one of the large company CEOs last week, and he said that we keep recalibrating the tactics constantly, keeping the strategic directions. He's in the pharma business, but he said that we have to keep doing it at the moment. Instead of reviewing operations once in a week, we are regularly reviewing operations and making fine-tuning adjustments at the CEO level, very, very regularly. And this is possible in a family-led business, but in a non-family business, whether this is possible or not. And closely reevaluate assumptions. They almost on a daily basis, they look at the assumptions and see whether there are changes happening or not. So don't lose sight of the long-term goals. That's what he said, and priorities, but keep adjustments, make adjustments. That's very important. So, which also means that takes me back to my home state, Kerala, where there is the martial art, the Kalaripayattu. And some of the basic principles of success in Kalaripayattu is that the confidence, the versatility, anticipation, speed of response, flexibility, quick reflex, agility, and open mind. All these qualities are required to be a successful strategist. Okay, and then only you will have presence of mind. That's very, very important. So final couple of questions, and then I will close. Have divestment strategies changed in the context of rapidly changing industry structure and shorter product life cycles? Whether has it happened in the traditional large corporates versus not family businesses, small, medium-sized businesses, family control or non-family control, first generation versus third generation, large families or smaller families. So all different combinations. It's very interesting to look at it. Okay. Yet another question is that what's the effect of quality of family governance? That's my one major area of interest is family governance. And family governance means that is the relationship taken fairly? Are family members treated fairly? Are family members transparent, whether it is straightforward or not? That's the essence of family governance. So the governance quality has huge implications for corporate governance, professionalization, as well as the business strategies, the growth strategies, investment strategies, divestment strategies, appointment strategies. Any of the corporate organizational strategies will be influenced by the family dynamics. So it is very important to look at these areas also. Okay, so I can go on and on, but let me stop here. So if there are any questions, I can try to respond. So I'm stop sharing the screen. Okay. So if any questions are there, I can try to respond.
Yes, thank you, Professor Ramachandran. I think we have few hands raised. Hetal Sonpal, you can go.
Yeah. Good evening, Professor, and congratulations. I think that's a fantastic presentation. It's quite an eye-opener. I didn't know so much about family business, and some statistics are going to remain with me going forward. I'm more from the startup world. I'm more from the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And in fact, that's one of the research areas which I'm looking at. I was intrigued by that slide which talked about the ownership going down in professional-led organizations and going up in family-led organizations. Does that indicate?
No. Let me clarify, Hetal.
Sure.
So what the slide said that this is about the holding structure in the listed companies.
Right.
About 5,000 companies are there.
Right.
So what we find is that on an average, the family's holding is going up from 47% to more than 50%. Okay.
Yeah.
Which means that complement to that, the non-family members holding is coming down.
Right.
It's not family versus non-family.
Okay. Got it. But is that anyway indicating the financial soundness of the family-run businesses? Could I construe that in any way?
I would say that the family's confidence in their own business.
Okay, but
okay, so
this confidence doesn't help, right? You should have enough money to put it in the system as well.
Yeah,
right?
that raises that leads you to another question. We have done a research on the pledging.
Yeah.
And how Z went down and how C or several other companies got into trouble. So pledging itself, that's a route many families take to raise funds and raise their stake in the company instead of diluting their holding.
Right. The other related question, sir, was the ability to manage perception. We heard about all kinds of startups going through tough times during COVID. We didn't hear so much about family-run businesses going through equally tough times. Is it a perception management which they are better at compared to a professional-run business?
I would say that the support system in a typical family business is much stronger. I would say that that's one major reason, because as you know, in the startup, it's a solo ride or lonely ride, and very often you don't have the funds. I mean, even the promised funds may not come.
Yeah.
So therefore, and also one other thing I have found between family as well as family startup versus non-family startup, is that the kind of free mentoring coming from the family, both mentoring, psychological, financial, or network effect, social network effect, which is missing for a standalone startup.
I think the best example is Jio, where Mukesh Ambani claims it's a startup.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. Ramachandran sir, would you like to ask your question? Sir, you are on mute.
Mute.
Yes.
I would make a light-hearted comment. Professor Ramachandran said 91% is family business and only 9% non-family. So I think it's a good idea to focus as a bread and butter area, the family business for strategy people.
Absolutely. And let me also tell you, Rameshan, that is a hugely unresearched area.
Exactly, because we are chasing that 9% and we are not looking at the 91%.
And we have sort of a herd mentality. We go by what's published so far. But also there is another interesting, just to add to that, many of the or the top journals are showing a lot of interest in family business. And there are special issues coming from many journals on family-controlled businesses. So therefore, I would say that it's worth exploring that, and you can be a pioneer there.
Right, sir, we are already working on it in IMK. We do a lot of work in
Excellent.
Comparing family and non-family ownership structures.
Very good. I'm really delighted.
Students, Professor Sumit, I don't know whether he is there, but he's the advisor, and I was one of the committee members.
Yes,
we work on that topic.
Sumit.
Yes, how are you, sir?
Very good, very good. Good to see you.
Fine, and nice to see you after a long time. So the other thing, sorry, I mean, I will raise my hand. Otherwise, there are others in the queue. Yeah, I will raise my hand. I'll wait. These others can go, and then I will come.
Nice.
A related question to what you just mentioned, sir. Are family businesses open to strategic input? Since this is a strategic management discussion, just wanted to understand that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The one major thing in the family business is that you have to get their trust. At that top leadership. There is no point in talking to a MD just because she or he is the MD. But you need to find out who calls the shots. Okay, and that depends on the trust. I mean, large family businesses engage the big consulting firms for various reasons. But at this, there is huge area of possibilities in the mid segment. If you take the 1,000 to 5,000 or even 10,000 crore bracket, many of them are not very open to large consulting firms because they think that they don't add so much of value. So, I mean, and what the route I took, or I believe taking, is case writing. That's the best way to understand the dynamics, understand the ground realities.
Okay. Got it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to interrupt here, actually, since we have this second speaker, Professor Zhang, joining from Australia. So I would request the people who have questions, can you please wait till the session ends?
Or I have another Ladashri. So
Yes,
if they write to me, I will try to
respond
because I would like to be in touch with them.
Sure, sir. Sure,
So
sir.
you can share my, I mean, some of them have my email IDs, but others can get my email IDs. And you are free to share my presentation also, no problem.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much. I will communicate your contact.
Thank you. Thank you. I may have to leave sooner than later. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, sir, for your time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I would now request Professor Naisel to take forward the session and introduce our second speaker for the evening.
Right. Thank you so much, Latasri. Professor Zhang is our next speaker, right? And as we just kind of chatted before the introduction, already he kind of introduced himself, but let me just formally introduce him. Professor Stephen Zhang is a professor of entrepreneurship at the University of Adelaide. He studies entrepreneurs and top management teams and how they behave under uncertainties. Professor Stephen has published in articles in many top leading journals such as ETNP, AMJ, among others. He's also actively publishing research on COVID-19 in health journals. Professor Stephen received his bachelor's degree at Nanyang Technological University, Singapore, and his PhD from the National University of Singapore. Prior to his academic career, he has founded ventures and worked in several industries, including engineering, management, consultancy, market research, and innovation management. His research has drawn wide interest, giving him opportunities to raise more than $1.5 million of grants in several countries. With the support of World Bank and the Chilean Ministry of Economy, Stephen has founded the Center for Entrepreneurial Strategy under Uncertainty in the Catholic University of Chile. He's also the founding director of the Asia Pacific Entrepreneurship and Innovation Society and the Mental Health of Vulnerable Workers Initiative, which is dedicated to identifying mentally vulnerable workers under COVID-19. With this, let me once again invite Professor Stephen. Thank you so much, sir.
Yes, thank you for the kind introduction. It's good to see many of you here. Some are familiar faces and some are new friends. It's great, to be in this conference. So I guess I'm talking, a very similar topic, to Professor Cavio. So that saved me a lot of, efforts in introducing the topic. So I guess everyone here, probably is very knowledgeable about, strategy and the uncertainty. So I probably don't have to introduce, why is that important. As Professor Cavio was talking about, technology is changing, market is changing, and COVID, on top of that. So, there's a lot of uncertainty. And similarly, my research, focuses on strategic decision, making under uncertainty. So the key issue here is that, the uncertainty that top executives, the CEOs, the top management team, and the entrepreneurs are dealing with is often mathematically intractable. So there's no volatility as, in financial or mathematical modeling, right? So I mean, all of you know that, none of the executives actually use any formulas. There's no numbers there. So, decision analysis and, quantitative Monte Carlo simulation, whatever we can throw in probably doesn't, probably don't apply there. So my research, really focuses on how do top executives, actually make decisions, in this uncertainty context. Sorry, because regardless of the lack of mathematical modeling, these computationally intractable problems, executives make strategic decision makings all the time. And what we do here is try to study that from social psychological perspectives, because there's a stream there's a rich stream of research in social psychology. And they have been studying how people make decisions, especially under uncertainty for such a long time. And what we do is probably relatively simple, try to test and, bring the theories, which seems to be applicable to business settings and see, how they work out. So I think, one of the audience was talking about, perceptions. So, because there's no hard, quantitative, objective data. So the executives have to rely, on their perception as the input for the decision making. And because there's nothing which is, absolutely, absolute, they have to use their values as guideposts, and their social roles as, the mode of, how to make, the decisions, and their social and human capital as the apparatus. And as a result, of course, their information processing, will be biased. But, as I argue later on, it's largely, functional. So these are some of the perspectives or theoretical lens, we can use to study how executives, actually making their decisions. So I'll give you, some of the examples. So this is mostly, based on my own research, so that I'm pretty, I can be a little bit more confident in talking about it. I would love to talk about stuff happening in India, but I guess everyone here probably know way better than I do. So I try to stay with my research area, which is which is the foundation of what I'm talking about here. So there are some studies, which I have done, with my collaborators on, strategic leaders' perception as input. So in the first study, so that was done by, that was led by, Entice, one of my former postdocs. And we studied entrepreneurs or founder CEOs in Startup Chile, which is a top accelerator around the world. And what we found is that when entrepreneurs' perception change, their actions and strategies and business change. So there's a direct association between top executives' perception and their strategic decision making, as well as the business outcome. So specifically, what we found is that entrepreneurs' perceived uncertainty are related to the amount of business exploration they do in their business, as well as the number of business opportunities the companies are exploring and pursuing. In another study, again on the founder CEOs, in Startup Chile, what we found is that founder CEOs' perceived uncertainty is also a key determinant of the business strategy. So in particular, what we found is that the entrepreneurs who perceive high uncertainty, they tend to make their business more adaptable. And also those who search more information as inputs would make their business more adaptable as well. So the perception does have a change on the business strategy in terms of the number of opportunities they pursue, as well as how flexible, how adaptable they make their business to be. And recently, also did some perception studies under the COVID context. So in one study, so this is a study we have done of business owners under COVID situation. So we did a survey, a two-way survey of 300, a little over 300 owners of small businesses. So the survey was done initially in China in the first wave, in March 2020, when China has one of the most stringent lockdown period. And then we did the second survey when the lockdowns were lifted. And what we found is that those business owners and the CEOs who were more perceptive of their business environment were less likely to reopen their businesses right after the COVID-19 lockdown was lifted. So this was interesting because, generally being more perceptive of the environment is seen as a very good attribute or a very good capability of the entrepreneurs or the managers. But what we found is actually has a down effect. So the more aware they are of the environment, the less likely they're going to reopen, because we want business to reopen, right? But actually those who are more perceptive of the environments were less likely to reopen their businesses. In another study, so the sample here is a sample of Peruvian employees in South America, and there we studied specifically COVID-19 risk perception. So this was done by former doctors, visiting doctors mine. And we developed a scale of COVID-19 risk perception. And what we found is that it does matter because, it has, consequences on, entrepreneurs, and employees' mental health, such as depression. And I think a lot of know how that, is really consequential right now, around the world as we are locking down, we're still very much in the lockdown. And the second stream of research, again, is talking about, what can, entrepreneurs or strategic leaders or CEOs or top management teams, rely on when there's incomplete information, there's no algorithm they can make decisions. So without a clear path, without, a clear model, so what we found is that people would fall back on their values to provide guidance on what to do. So values are really, what is relatively more important versus what is less important. So there we did a three-wave survey study of CEOs and top management teams of SMEs, and in this case, in Iran. And Iran is interesting in the sense that, it's unlike US, which has this, bi-party system, right? You're either left or you're either right. And Iran is a multi kind of party system, which allowed people to have, a fuller, how do we say, manifestation of their, ideologies. And I think that's probably the case, I think, in India as well, which has, multiple parties. So what we found is interesting is that, so firm strategies are fundamentally shaped by the executive's political ideology, specifically the social and the economic ideology. So this, may seem, very distal, and some people may think maybe, economic ideology is somehow linked to the strategic decision making. But what we found is that, social ideology also matters. So the distinct ideologies, political ideologies, people carry in their mind because that's a deep level belief they have, do have, a downside, a subsequent, consequence or ramifications on how their companies are making strategies. And in this case, I think we are studying that for corporate entrepreneurship, as the first speaker mentioned, which is important in India as well. And besides political ideology, we also had another paper. So this is recently just accepted in the Journal of Management Studies, where we studied, the gross need strength, which is a particular kind of value, and that is very business-based. So in layman's term, gross need strength is really like, whether someone has a strong ambition to grow career-wise. If someone, think, like career advancement is something valuable, is something important, then they have high, gross need strength. And what we found is that, CEO and top management teams, gross need strength, which is a work-specific value, predicts their firm's actual growth. So here we survey, the CEOs and top management teams of, small and medium enterprises, and then we check, their employee size and, the revenues over time. And what we found is that, obviously, the first hypothesis is kind of obvious. So if the CEO is high in GNS and the TMT is high in GNS, of course, the company will grow larger than, when the CEO and the GNS, when the CEOs and the TMTs have low GNS. But however, like when one of them, has lower GNS and the other one has higher GNS, what we found is that when the CEO is the one that has high GNS and the TMT has low GNS, their companies grow much faster and larger than when the CEO has low GNS and the TMT has high, GNS. So this paints a very nuanced picture of how CEOs and the TMTs, they work, together, and how their own works, specific values are predicting the, firm growth in terms of size and revenue. So it also highlights, the configuration of top executive matters, because a lot of, I think, that there's a proliferation of studies on top management team, but they tend to take, say, the average or the diversity, which cannot actually pinpoint, who is high and who is low. And that, configuration, doesn't matter, as shown in this study. And in the third stream of research, we use, social role theory. And I guess, this is very evident in India. I think, the social role, of females and males in India are very distinct. So I don't have to persuade you there. Women are more communal and men are more agentic. So the difference we take is that a lot of, the studies in strategy and corporate governance, they are taking the view, of, which one is better, right? It's female social role or female characteristic, better or worse than males in corporate settings. Or maybe it's the female role, more discriminated against, in corporate, or board settings. So rather than saying, which one is better and which one is being discriminated against, we reason, the female role and the male role, they complement each other in triggering, a positive interpersonal dynamics so that, the gender balance or the gender diversity matters. So here again, we surveyed, about 120 teams, and we found, TMT's gender diversity, improve, firms' strategic dexterity. So that, it really highlights, this gender composition in senior leadership it's not just an equity issue or a right issue. Of course, it's an equity issue, it's a right issue. You know, female deserves to be on those boards, female deserves on top management teams, but also we highlight, you know, by having more balanced, you know, gender teams in top management teams, there's a strategic value to the company. There's a business case for that. It's not just an equity case. It's not just a human right case. There's a business case, you know, strategically for placing, you know, more balance, you know, a top management team in companies. And in the fourth stream, you know, we try to study, you know, like how do they make decisions, you know, from their social and human capital. So this is again, you know, coming out from, you know, a visiting Dr. student of mine. And in that paper, we were the first to link, you know, social media use to entrepreneurial entry. So what we found is that individual social media use is positively associated with entrepreneurial entry. And this is somehow interesting because when we think about social media, you know, social media offers like very weak ties. And there's a lot of fake information or inaccurate information there. It can also trigger, you know, groupthink, you know, on the different ideologies. So we thought, you know, how could that, you know, but what we found is that still helps, you know, the individuals to build networks or social capitals to enhance their chance of becoming entrepreneurs. But however, because social media has so much, you know, fake information and weak ties, you know, it has a lot of noise, you know, rather than true signals. So people who are more cautious, you know, so people who have low trust propensity, they actually benefit more from social media use than people who just, you know, that kind of blindly, you know, trust everything. So not only do we find, you know, individual social media is positively related to their entrepreneurial entry, we also found, you know, their trust propensity negatively or dampens the relationship because, you know, they need to discern, you know, what to trust and what not to trust before they can benefit from, you know, social media. And similarly, in another study, so with my colleague, we also, you know, argue that, you know, entrepreneurs need to consider how they can start from the means, you know, which is really social and human capital, you know, to better design adventures. So this is largely built on a conversation of effectuation theory, which, you know, they say you want to start from the means, but we say, you know, everyone has so many means. How many means do you want to start with? And among the means, you know, which one do you choose and which means you don't choose, right? You need to think about, you know, you just don't blindly start from every single mean you can think of. And in the very last frame, I will be, you know, relatively quick here is that, you know, strategic leaders, you know, entrepreneurs or CEOs, information processing, it's really biased, but it can still be largely functional. So in an agenda setting paper, so this was done with actually a master student of mine, you know, when I was in Chile. So again, I think, you know, you probably be very familiar with arguments. You know, most of the decisions that concern the minds and heart of, you know, executives are computationally intractable. And biases or cognitive biases are systematic deviation from rationality. They're very widespread. You know, you can't actually, you know, take them out, but they do carry, you know, fundamental implications, you know, to businesses. So what we are arguing is that biases are not necessarily bad, but they're also not necessarily good, because some people say that evolutionarily adapted, so they must be good. You know, there's a stream of, you know, psychologists who are trying to say, you know, biases are always good, they're functional. So that's not the case either. So we draw from the great rationality base, and, you know, we try to figure out, you know, when a bias is good or bad. So I won't go into, you know, details there. But biases represents a very nuanced underlying decision-making, you know, phenomenon. So it really calls for better design because a lot of past studies, you know, they have, you know, whatever findings, and that's largely attributes, you know, to how do we say the less optimum design they have. We need more experiments, you know, in businesses, in entrepreneurs, and, you know, among CEOs to better tease out the causality and what is really happening there. So these are some of the other empirical studies we have done, you know, on, you know, overconfidence and you know, decision-making biases. So I'll largely skip them. So maybe this is interesting. So in this study, we did a mixed method, you know, paper. So we had a survey of entrepreneurs and then experiments with engineering students who were very likely to become entrepreneurs. And what we found is that effectuation which is posited as expert heuristic, decreases overconfidence bias, but increases illusion of control. Yeah, so whatever we are teaching our students, because I know like a lot of you, are teaching, different heuristics and, such as effectuation or whatever, it does have consequence on how they are making decisions, subconsciously in terms of, the biases they're making. All right, so in a nutshell, I hope my research programs, helps to illustrate, top executive strategic decision making for, these very tough, computational intractable problems. And of course, I showed, like 5, different theoretical lenses, but they are way more than, what I can show here. So such studies, like such as my study, like I use like, data from emerging economies all the time. I think I actually have, a study, using data from India. So that's not, published yet. But they can, lead to, I hope, meaningful theoretical contribution and practical guidance, in management as well as entrepreneurship journals. And I hope my research, gives you some ideas, for your own research in emerging economies such as India, and give you some ideas on how to design or support, your own, research papers, because, we're all building a community, and together we can build, more scientific evidence to research and to study and to teach, this very important phenomenon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Zhang. That was very insightful, and I am sure that it has provoked some very interesting thoughts in the strategy scholars. We can take few questions. Hetal, can you please go with your question?
Sure. Thank you very much, Professor, for staying up late and sharing this fantastic presentation with us. My first thought was you have been super active in the last 2 years of the pandemic. I mean, I was looking at the dates of your research papers. You've been super duper busy. My question was, from a strategy perspective, in times like these, do you go wide or do you go deep? Would you rather, pick out the area from where you can actually get a lot of information and just go with it? Or whether you would try and stretch wider? I mean, what's been your overall approach, in times like these when you have limited time, and I'm sure that there's the challenge is the moving target, right? I mean, every 3 months, every 6 months, the scenario of the pandemic has been changing. So you might be worried that you might do thorough research on something, and by the time the report comes out, it's already outdated.
Right. So that's a great question. It's a wonderful question, and honestly, I don't have the answer. I don't know which one is better. Maybe that's a a great research question for someone to study. So honestly, I don't know. I can see benefits for going for either approach, or maybe like Bhattacharya, doing both is good. But I think that's a really interesting, like a balance, and I honestly don't know the answer. It's a great research question.
Yeah, because I think from a perception management perspective, the entrepreneurs would probably want to manage perception than reality, because nowadays, because of the influence of social media, it's very easy to change the sentiment, overnight, especially for the large influential startups. But in reality, of course, things are always bad at the back end. So.
Right. I totally agree.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Zhang, for taking the question. Ramachandran sir, if you can quickly ask your question. I would like to say that this would be the last question, as our last speaker has some time limitation. So, Ramachandran sir.
Yeah, Professor Stephen, I would like to make one small remark. In our story, 4 blind men are inspecting the elephant, but in your story, there are 6. I hope you have not added the strategy people as 5th or 6th.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The other point I would like to mention is that in the China experience, you said those who have reviewed the environment did not start the business immediately after the COVID relief given. Maybe I would feel that those who are carefully evaluating their environment may not be willing to sweep the risk under the carpet. They may be a little more cautious and they take a longer view. That's it. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's kind of the explanation we have for the paper, right? So people's perception matter, and in that case, it's something that's a little counterintuitive because a lot of people think like those who are more alert to the environmental changes, they can actually act a little quicker. But what we found is that actually they were waiting, and they were not reopening just after the lockdown was lifted. Yeah, so that's very insightful, your comments.
Thank you so much, Professor. Nigel sir, I would request you to introduce our last but not the least speaker for today's evening.
That's right. Thank you once again, Professor Zhang. That was very insightful. And we are moving on to our last speaker, which is Professor Bhattacharya. Professor Bhattacharya is the HJ Sofer Chair in Sustainability and Ethics at the Katz Graduate School of Business, University of Pittsburgh. He's a world-renowned expert in business strategy innovation aimed at increasing both business and social value. His research and teaching focus on how companies can use under-leveraged intangible assets, such as corporate identity, reputation, corporate social responsibility, and sustainability, to strengthen stakeholder relationships and drive firm market value. Professor Bhattacharya has published over 100 articles and has over 37,000 citations as per Google Scholar. He has also published various books. He has served on the editorial review boards and as editors of special issues of many leading international publications. He's the founder of the Center for Sustainable Business, as well as the ESMT Sustainable Business Roundtable, a forum with more than 25 multinational members aimed at discussing opportunities and challenges in mainstreaming sustainability practices. Professor Bhattacharya is part of a select group of faculty members that have been named twice to Business Week's Outstanding Faculty list. He has been recognized by both Thomson Reuters and Google Scholar as one of the top cited scholars in the field. He has won several Best Paper Awards, Teaching Awards, and Research Prizes. He's also a finalist for the Aspen Institute's Faculty Pioneer Award in 2007. And he's also received the Emory Williams Distinguished Teaching Award in 1995, which is the highest teaching award at Emory University. He received his PhD from the Wharton School of University of Pennsylvania, his MBA from the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, and his bachelor's with honors from St. Stephen's, Delhi. Professor Bhattacharya, it's my honor to welcome you to this presentation.
Thank you, Professor George, for that very kind introduction. And it's a wonderful opportunity for me to participate in this Pan-IIM conference, being an IIM alumnus myself from way back in 1984. And I, of course, thank Professor Ramachandran for reaching out to me and inviting me to participate. So I'm going to speak, it's a slight shift of gears, but there are points of overlap, of course, with the previous two presentations, but I really will focus more on this idea of how can we enable every human being ultimately to look at kind of the world through the lens of sustainability, because that's really what is needed at this point in time if we are to survive kind of the existential challenges of our time. And I would like to start my talk by, in fact, reviewing some of these challenges. Now, exactly at this time, I don't know how to move this, what works. Something's happened. So these are the challenges of the 21st century, or at least some of them, right? So climate change, we don't have to say anything more about these things, but just put them up. Plastics in the ocean, right? So water is running out. So our water footprint is humongous. And inequality, I mean, inequality today is higher than ever before. If you can see the chart, you will see that the top 1%, the wealth is growing at an amazing rate, whereas the bottom kind of is pretty stagnant. And then on the other hand, we have issues like, 1 in 5 people globally do not have access to electricity. So here we are doing this exciting conference on Zoom. At the same time, 20% of the world still don't have electricity. It's something actually to a sobering thought. 4.3 million people are dying because of indoor pollution. So they're lighting their fires on, the charcoal and, which is highly, highly unhealthy. This is a very, very sobering statistic that 65 million people, girls across the world, are out of school, right? And it will take until 2072, I will be, you know, long, long gone, for the poorest girls in the global south to learn to read. And in the midst of all this, I had to doctor this slide to introduce COVID, you know, and this is my own attempt to insert that picture. I mean, this is as creative as I can get on PowerPoint, I can tell you that. And COVID really, you know, opened our eyes to some major happenings, kind of, you know, or some fundamental disconnects that we have in this world of capitalism. So what I did was I Googled climate change, coronavirus and climate change together. In how many articles does it come? These two things, are they mentioned together? And it turns out that I cannot even read this number, but you know, some very, very 65.2 million hits we get. And why is this? And if you actually take a look, I mean, take a step back and try to think about it, both coronavirus and the impending climate change, or the ongoing climate change, not even impending, have their roots in the world's current economic system, you know, and this idea that we can pursue growth at all, you know, at all costs, infinite growth at all costs, at the expense of the finite environment on which our survival depends. I mean, we believe that we can keep growing, we can keep growing, we can keep growing without regard to the finite nature of the resources, finite nature of planet Earth that we have. So air, clean air is finite, water is finite, minerals in the earth are finite. So, but we are fueling infinite growth. Yesterday, I listened to Geeta Gopinath on NDTV, and beautiful interview, excellent interview in the evening. Not once did she say that people need to curtail their consumption. But I can tell you that if people do not curtail their consumption, particularly in the global north, we are not going to win this battle by any chance. And more interestingly, I think the origin of the virus makes it a perfect example of how kind of the way capitalism has commodified our life to turn it into profit kind of all the time. So the idea that we can eat exotic animals, you know, take them out of the wild and eat these exotic animals, exactly that market, the wet market in China I'm talking about. The idea that we can go deep in the jungle one day to do a safari and the next day be on a plane back into metropolitan streets of London, back to our work. It does not happen. Nature does not happen that way. The world does not happen that way, but it is capitalism. So capitalism fuels this kind of thing of, oh, we are mankind, we are supreme, we can do anything. And this has to be changed. And that's why I talk about that lens of sustainability. And sustainability to me simply means kind of integrating environmental and social concerns into every decision we make, whether it's a business decision or whether it's a personal decision. It could be as a consumer, it could be as an employee, it could be as a regulator, it could be as a supplier, whatever it is. If we can get everyone, or most of us, to put on that lens of sustainability when we make these decisions, we would be in a better place. And that is my main thesis for this talk, is that that's the answer I have today to combat this strategic uncertainty that we have currently going on. There is no uncertainty about the fact that there is a much greater horror approaching. We are racing to the edge of disaster, far worse than anything that's happened in human history. And that's Noam Chomsky, when the pandemic actually was in full swing, although it doesn't show any signs of going away even 1.5 years later. But that's the prediction that he made at that time. And so that's not uncertain, that's certain, it's coming. Now, the question is, what is it that we can do to kind of, you know, enable us to mitigate and kind of ultimately fighting climate change is not the ultimate objective of mankind. The ultimate objective of mankind is to give every human being a dignified life. You know, if you think about the fact that there are 2 billion people today in the world who do not have access to a toilet, now that's a sobering thought, you know, whereas our friends Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are actually going off to Mars to find life there. Hey, how about sparing a little bit of that change and giving everybody in the world access to a toilet? I think that would be a bit more of a contribution. But if we want to fight these battles that are coming up, we have to behave differently. And so the first observation I will make is that we need to transition from capitalism, where we live under this thing called the tragedy of the commons, where every person tries to, or every corporation tries to maximize private gain at that which will lead to collective loss. That's the idea of the tragedy of the commons. So climate change is a classic example of tragedy of the commons. As you know, climate change is man-made. It's been established by now that is man-made. And why? Because it is man's desire for consuming, extracting, building stuff, not paying for externalities like pollution, not paying for externalities like the healthcare of their workers, etc. So very simple 2 by 2. Now you've seen a couple of these already. So on one axis, we have social and environmental value. On the other one, we have business value. Historically, what has happened is that we have operated in the negative upper left-hand quadrant, where businesses have taken value away from the environment, taken value away from society, and boosted their business value at the same time. So this is the Milton Friedman school of thought. Profit maximization at all costs. This is what is business's responsibility, is to maximize profits. But look at where this has brought us. Right up to the coronavirus. I would also argue that that is a man-made problem, seriously. If we had behaved better, maybe it wouldn't have happened. So the first order of business is to transition from that upper left-hand quadrant to the upper right-hand quadrant, where by creating value for the environment and society, we can drive business value as well. So think about the employee who's treated well, the employee who finds meaning in their job. That employee is likely to contribute to your work much more than an employee who doesn't find any meaning in their job. So creating CSR initiatives, sustainability initiatives, these things can actually empower, both the planet, green initiatives and people-centric initiatives can actually improve your profitability. And that's what we call the triple bottom line. And I am arguing that it is absolutely necessary for businesses as a collective to transition to this triple bottom line and conduct business through that lens of sustainability. So that's my main thesis here. In 2011, when I visited Professor Ramachandran in Rohtak, I had just published a book which basically was on how do stakeholders react to companies' corporate responsibility initiatives. 10 years ago, we were not talking about sustainability, the term, as much as we are talking today, but corporate responsibility, yes, it's a business's responsibility to integrate the environment and societal concerns. And when I started doing this research, I was researching companies like Procter & Gamble and General Mills and many other big companies. I made one fundamental observation, and the observation was that these CSR officers or sustainability officers who I was speaking with, they were very good people and bright people, but they were also very lonely people in that they did not have a seat at the strategic high table of the company. They were not hobnobbing with the CEO and the C-suite. They were left alone to do their own thing. And I found this terrible because my entire research had pointed to the fact that it's only when your CSR is integrated with your business strategy that is going to yield that reward that I spoke about, that stakeholders are going to reward you. That's you're actually going to make some economic value out of doing your CSR work. And so how is this? Why is this going on? Why is this happening? I started asking myself. And I was doing a lot of executive education as well. I was actually living in Berlin, Germany at the time, and working with large companies, Lufthansa, Siemens, BASF, all these people. And I discovered that there is one fundamental roadblock in most companies. And that roadblock is that sustainability, the well-being of our planet and people, is viewed as someone else's problem in most companies. So small companies think it's the big company's problem. Big companies think it's the government's problem, and governments think it's the other country's problem. And within a company, I asked all these managers, hey, what about sustainability? Because I would go in and teach sustainability. Do you care about? Yeah, we care about it, but I have more important things to do. We have a sustainability department, and they will take care of these, issues like climate change and poverty and all of that. I found that really, kind of strangely disconnected from the reality of the situation that we were facing. So I kept looking for companies kind of, okay, is anybody getting it right? And I found that, yes, there are actually a handful of companies where sustainability is everyone's problem. And one such company that I discovered is Unilever. Now, Unilever, which I worked very closely with over the past 5-6 years, is a company where sustainability is actually everybody's problem. And they have empowered their employees to the extent where employees come up with solutions to sustainability problems. And when I say employees, I mean rank and file employees, shop floor workers. So this example of this one T, PG tips, a worker in an UK factory basically figured out a way to shave 3 millimeters from this tea bag package. Now, you might think that 3 millimeters is nothing, what's the big deal? But when you multiply 3 millimeters by the scale of the number of tea bags that Unilever is producing every day, it ends up to a big amount. And that is a useful contribution, both for the planet, because paper is a precious resource, as well as for profit, because you're saving costs. And when you save cost on the paper, your bottom line kind of goes up. So I started researching these kinds. So what do these guys actually do? And the word that came to my mind as I was visiting actually a Unilever factory in a place called Khamgaon in Maharashtra. I don't know if any of you have heard of that town. It's 8 hours away from Mumbai. I had to take an overnight train to get there. But basically, the idea is that small actions by lots of sustainability owners, all your employees, in other words, leads to a big difference in the company's sustainability impact. So that's the title of my new book, which came out in 2019, end of 2019. It's, most of the book's life has been under the wraps of COVID, but that has not, diminished my enthusiasm for speaking about the ideas presented in the book. Now, the research behind the book was, I worked with more than 25 global companies, going from Chile, as Professor Zhang was saying he worked there. I also went to Chile, to China, to all over the world, basically. And 100+ interviews with C-suite, CEOs, as well as rank and file factory employees, just to learn what do they do, what works, what doesn't work, etc. And I do want to point out that this book is kindly available in India, and you can buy it from Amazon.in at a fraction of the price at which it is available in the US. So I hope you'll take a look at it. And the telling quote here, one of the telling quotes in the book, is that make sustainability everyone's job. If you have one exception, then everyone thinks they're the exception. And that's the spirit with which Unilever operates, and they're not the only company. I will show you more examples. But the fundamental issue is psychological ownership. What I'm proposing is that it's possible to endow stakeholders, be they employees, be they customers, be they regulators, be they suppliers who are community members. You can endow them with this sense of sustainability ownership. And I went to the literature to say, hey, what is this idea of, is there a literature on ownership? And sure enough, there is quite a big literature. It's burgeoning, but it's quite promising. And psychological ownership refers to feelings of possessiveness, connection towards an appealing object, such as a person, company, or even an idea. So it's not necessarily legal ownership. It's just something that you care deeply about, because ownership, to paraphrase Jean-Paul Sartre, is part of the human condition. It's part of it's who we are. We like to own things that we care about because it's also an extension of ourselves, right? So it's an identity. It's a way to express our identities. And now, why is ownership a good concept to apply to sustainability? It's a good concept because ownership fulfills three fundamental human needs. The need for efficacy, which is essentially for each of us as human beings, we want to feel competent and we want to feel capable of affecting our environments. And sustainability offers the chance to contribute meaningful solutions, even if it means sorting the mail in the right way and disposing of, the paper, the unused mail in the right way. It allows us to express who we are, our identity. So there's a lot of literature out how employees lack meaning in the workplace today. And if you give them this opportunity to work on sustainability issues, they find more meaning. It's like, and tell people, look, I'm part of the solution. And a sense of belonging as well, like, okay, we are in this together. We are fighting climate change as a collective. I'm doing something for my children. So all of these are able to be fulfilled through this concept of sustainability ownership, which I prefer in the book. So taking all this together, I essentially unfold a model, which is called the sustainability ownership model. And I want to spend like a couple of minutes just telling you about in broad strokes, the phases of this model. And the phases essentially are three. One is you incubate your sustainability plan. Then you launch your sustainability plan into your organization. And then finally, you entrench that sustainability plan. And to entrench, it means to make it routine. So like today, I hope most of you put off the light in your room as a routine when you go out of a room, or you put off the tap when you brush your teeth as a routine. Similarly, why shouldn't I, as a routine, think about the environment if I'm going to buy a new factory or build a new factory somewhere, or if I'm going to kind of, look at my water usage or whatever it is? Want to use that lens of sustainability, make it routine. So how do we do these three things? And just in 2 minutes or less, the first thing, and this is the most important step, it's the North Star, is you have to define your company purpose. Purpose is not the same as mission. Purpose is the answer to the difficult question of why do we do what we do? Why do we do what we do? If every business asks that question, the answer will always be in terms of a societal benefit that a business provides. It will not be that we do this to make money. If you're saying we do this to make money, you are truly in the wrong business, so to speak. You have not understood the purpose of business yet. And you have to kind of lead with purpose. And this is the CEO and the C-suite's job, to articulate the purpose and then to cascade, inspire epiphanies. So one very powerful video out on YouTube is by this gentleman called Ray Anderson, who is the CEO of a company called Interface, a carpet manufacturer. And he says in this video, in a very emotional way, that he said, when I started looking at our footprint, I realized that I'm a plunderer and I should be put in jail the way I have been dealing with the world, the way I have been treating the world in kind of building my business. I should be put in jail. He says this. You can mark my words and look at the video. So you have to inspire those epiphanies, kind of take people to the front line and see what they're actually, how they're making the world a better place. Second thing, you have to define what's material for your business, right? Materiality. What is material? So every business does not have to run after CO2 reduction. A consulting business may have other priorities. So you have conduct what's called a materiality analysis, figure out what are top two or three issues that you have to deal with, and kind of, cascade those goals to your employees so that they can have a deep understanding of it. Enel is a company, it's a very, very large electric utility company out of Italy. And I interviewed their CEO, and the CEO told me that, he learned his epiphany was in the Middle Eastern desert when he was working on a power plant project. And then he realized that the idea behind the project was that they would be building air-conditioned tents in the middle of the desert, and the nomads, the Bedouins, would come into the desert, into the air-conditioned tents and plonk down and watch TV in air-conditioned comfort. He said, when I heard that, I was blown away, because an electricity company's job is not to foist new habits on people, but it is rather to enable people do what they want to do, whether to keep warm, keep cool, power your laptop, whatever it is. So this idea of purpose, why do we do what we do? Every businessman has to ask this question for themselves. So once you're ready with your program, your purpose statement and your materiality, you're ready to launch this, cascade this to your entire employee base, whether it's 5 people, 10 people, 100,000 people, 500,000 people. And there are 2 main steps there. One is called Entice. We want to appeal to the head, hey, this is a smart thing to do because it saves you money. And the other one is the heart. Hey, this is the right thing to do, because what are your children going to do otherwise if the world disappears, right? So that's how you get. And example here was Apple, and the environmental directors of Apple told me that, well, this is the most fun part of our job, when we can go into the business and tell them, hey, not only will this save you money, it will also save precious resources, minerals for the world that our future generations need. And then people get pumped and they take action. It's not enough, however, to create willingness alone. You have to create ability. So you have to enable your employees to act sustainably, because everything is not as simple as putting off lights and printing two-sided. There are much tougher jobs like eco-efficiency analysis and all kinds of R&D that I don't know much about. But for those, you have to invest in training, you have to invest in management systems. And the whole idea is that you lower the costs of acting sustainably by installing these systems, by giving people the training, but you increase the benefits. And what does it mean to increase the benefits? It means to reward people psychological rewards, promotions, awards, claps on the back, whatever it is, so that this is a legitimate activity to pursue in the organization. And that's how you can make it everyone's job in marketing, in finance, in HR, in supply chain. No exceptions at all. And the final step, which is to entrench or to make routinized, for that, there are 3 things that are very, very important. One is you got to communicate your progress, because people love to know that they're making a difference. That's human nature. Oh, I actually helped to save 10 grams of CO2. That's meaningful. You've got to co-create solutions. See, employees always have ideas about how you can make your company more sustainable. And finally, celebrate your successes, celebrate your failures, make sustainability culture a part, integrated with your culture in your entire organization. Marks and Spencer is another organization I worked with closely for my book. They have there were award shows where where the whole organization is present. They will do it in a big auditorium, and they will call out a store employee for going the extra mile. And this is like an Oscar style red carpet show, just to show that we celebrate those who do good. There are companies like NL who even celebrate failures, believing that if we don't fail, we are not doing our job, or we are not trying hard enough. And the last part of the entrench, which is very important, and that's why a separate slide, is you've got to expand this idea of sustainability ownership from your organization to your industry and finally to society. So how do you do that? You collaborate with competitors, which is unheard of in our usual business operations. So put sustainability in the pre-competitive space. And one example of that is this roundtable for sustainable palm oil, where traditional competitors like Colgate and Nestle and Coca-Cola, Unilever, they've all come together to make palm oil, which is palm oil is a big source of deforestation because of deforestation. So, and just in the last COP26, it was agreed that by 2030, all the palm oil will be sustainable. So just a couple of examples of what ownership in action looks like, and just a couple of quotes. It's like one person for a very large company, 100,000 plus employees, says that some of the great leaps and breakthroughs with sustainability have happened because people across the organization have been inspired to change things themselves without coming to me to ask for permission or talk through the details. They know they're part of the business better than me. If 100,000 people wanted to come to the CSO and ask for permission each time, we would not make this kind of progress. Another factory director told me, an employee who decides that he can make changes to a valve that will save energy or save water, an employee who decides to do something differently with the way water flows through a line or our electricity use, add all those up, the executive said, you get a very big difference. So this is the idea behind small actions, big difference. If each of us can do something, then the sum total of that is very, very large. Now, I have quantified this idea of ownership, and actually there's a paper under third review at the Journal of Business Ethics where I'm showing that with co-authors, I'm showing that purpose drives ownership, and ownership in turn drives sustainable behaviors. It's a very, very strong link. So it actually does work in real life, and the model does hold in its essence. I'll leave you with one of my favorite quotes. It's, we don't inherit the earth from our parents. We actually borrow it from our children. And our children are going to be living in much more uncertain times than we live. We haven't seen anything yet of what the world will look like in the future. So if there is anything I can leave you with on a Friday evening at 7:30 before you, go for your evening drink and entertainment and food, it's that please let us just do what we can. And there's a wonderful quote from Arundhati Roy, who wrote in the Financial Times, that these pandemics are opportunities to go to the next portal, as she calls it. It's beautifully written. I'll share the slides so you can have them, no problem. But, so we have a choice. We can either continue the same old and be destroyed, which is inevitable, or we can travel light with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. And I certainly want all of us to imagine another world, and I want all of us to fight for that world, if not for us, for our children. So I have a center back in Pittsburgh. If anybody wants to engage, that's great. Please drop me a line if you would like to learn anything more or have a question. Follow. Let's connect on LinkedIn. I am active on Twitter and all of that stuff. So it's been my pleasure. I shall stop now, and Latasri, over to you.
Thank you so much, sir. That was indeed very much thought-provoking, at least for me personally. Sir, there are a couple of raised hands. Sir, Rajesh sir, please, if you can go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Professor Bhattacharya. It was very inspiring session to end the day, definitely. But on one note, while you criticized Milton Friedman, but Milton Friedman came in at a time when the world was going through probably the most toughest times of the deep recession.
Yeah.
And so the question is primarily, given the nature of context the world is in now, while we can say entrepreneurship, the businesses should act sustainably, but how responsible are our governments?
Oh.
And how responsible, and because primarily the reason why I'm asking this question is, it might be good for the top 500 listed companies of any country to do this. But if you go to the business down under, and which is the informal economy, especially in large countries across the world, sustainability actually comes at a cost.
Sure.
And the cost that has to be paid now for the future. So
Sure.
There are critical choices on a daily life here that we are talking about. Either you live for today or you live for tomorrow. Given that context, this ownership itself is a very blurry word for that segment of the population. And that's pretty large even now across the world. While I completely empathize with a section of the population doing this, but a large section probably cannot.
Yeah, and the section who cannot is not damaging, is not harming the world, really. I mean, sustainability, I think along. So let me answer. So there are multiple questions in what you said, or multiple thoughts at least. So Milton Friedman indeed came at the time of recession, but do you know that the consumption mania that exists today was socially engineered in the United States post World War II? So there is, so when, President Eisenhower was told by his advisors, let's make consumption a way of life. And there is a quote by a retail analyst called Victor Lebeau. I can send you the quote even. So this is, if this is socially engineered and people were taught, and now the United States is exporting that model of consumption mania to China, to India, to other parts of the world. It's not normatively, it's not right. And if it was socially engineered, it can be socially engineered again. If it was made by man, the consumption mania, it can be undone by man as well. I mean, and that's point number one I wanted to make. Point number two, it is absolutely right that the world is kind of, all parts of the world are not consuming the same amount. They don't have the same footprint. So the person who is putting food into their stomach to be able to survive does not, I don't think that person has a footprint that we have to really worry about. The person whose footprint we have to worry about are the wealthy and perhaps people like us, who are the upper middle class in countries like India and China and so on. So I think there is a way to balance, your livelihood and sustainability at the same time. It really has to start just at the top. And do you think Jeff Bezos gives a crap about the damn thing? No, because he can give $10 billion to fight climate change, but at the same time, kind of go off to space at an enormous, enormous footprint, right? So my job, as I defined it myself in my research and scholarship, was like, okay, if we can change the mindset of these large companies that have like these large employee bases, and if we can get them, to do things to produce in a sustainable fashion, to dispose in a sustainable fashion, it would be a good starting point, because these employees are also consumers. So when they go back home, they would talk to their families about essentially things. And I saw this in Kamgaon when I went to this plant. Employees learned how to harvest rainwater on their job, but then they went back home and started harvesting rainwater, for their laundry, for their washing at home, and so on and so forth. So employees are a very solid conduit. It does not end with employees, but they can spread the word. Now, you mentioned governments. I think the governments are at fault. They are the most at fault. If governments had done their job, we would not have had to, perhaps I would not have had to, proffer this notion of ownership and try to build it amongst companies. The whole idea of sustainability, corporate sustainability, is because corporations are the only ones standing today who are in a position to do something. Governments are paralyzed. I can guarantee you many of these pledges made at COP26 also won't hold good. They're just pledges, right? They're just pledges. Whereas with companies, if you can show that doing the right thing is also doing the smart thing monetarily, right? You have a lower cost of capital. Your cost of capital goes down if your sustainability performance is good. And there is research to show this. I mean, I can send you the papers. Then why would they not do it? If, so the argument for companies, I think, is much stronger, at least in my mind. And I am no expert in the governmental sphere, but what I've observed is less than flattering, I have to say. And that's why I'm saying that companies need to step up. And who knows, maybe once we introduce education in the high school level, which is something I'm also fighting for, sustainability education in middle school and high school, then maybe those who will also go to the government later, into IAS and into be regulators and so on, maybe they will come with a different mindset. But we've got to start somewhere. So all I'm saying is this is a starting point, not an ending point. Yeah. Professor Ramachandran.
Yeah, it's great to listen to you. You have been speaking in a very passionate way about sustainability, and also thank you for talking our sustainability concerns once again. But I would say most of the time we listen and we forget. It's fire and forget. You fire and we forget. Even in our personal lives, our social lives, community lives, we don't care for sustainability. We still waste a lot of water. We waste a lot of items which can be used for another 5-10 years. For instance, in my own apartment, I see some of our colleagues dumping dozens of usable books and unspoiled many household items, etc., for discarding. But I would use it for another 5 or 10 years, but they don't care because they have been brought up in some other consumerist environment and they continue like that. And most of the people think that, okay, no prediction is there that says that in your lifetime all these disasters are going to happen. Like water is not there, the world is going to end and so on. So long as it is not in my life, it's okay because another generation will take care. And that is a kind of concern which is happening not just in India, everywhere. And also USA and Western countries, what they are doing, they have destroyed the environment. They have destroyed everything that we talk about sustainability today. But now they are imposing the cost on poor countries like India or other developing countries. So that is this is I think this is even in the developed countries all talk of sustainability just hypocrisy. That's what I think.
I respectfully beg to differ that it's all hypocrisy. I don't think so. I do believe we just got a comment in the chat, from Bindu Matthew saying that she was involved. Person was involved in the corporate office in driving and implementing such as So I don't think everybody is a bad person, Professor Ramachandran. There are certainly bad actors. There's certainly bad actors, but when it comes to fighting for your life, I mean, and if you have children, I mean, I have a son who's 18. I am really scared to think of what life is going to be 50 years down the road, and if not for myself, I will do it for him, but I will not say it's his problem. When it comes to your children, you're not going to say it's their problem. I'll be dead and gone, so who cares? I don't think most of us are that hard-hearted, sir. So what we have to do is we have to stoke that fire, that the same passion. So if consuming is cool, if your Gucci watch or whatever, if that is cool, then being a minimalist can also be cool. Being a conscious consumer can also be cool. And that's why there is this whole field of responsible consumerism, and which we are talking about, and we are trying to kind of instill in our college students this idea. I mean, if at least in the United States, no college student today carries a plastic water bottle, like a single-use plastic water bottle. They at least know, no, I have to do this, I have to do that. They're slowly learning. It's not overnight. And I know this argument of developing countries need to develop. Of course, they need to develop, but you can continue on that path of doing this balancing act. You're not going to get rid of fossil fuels tomorrow. India cannot, the world cannot. Only 20% of our energy comes from renewable today. So we cannot shut off the coal power plants and go home. Yeah. But we have to continue to invest in renewables at a much heavier kind of rate, so that slowly we are able to phase out those coal-fired plants, over time. And we need to be, if we can educate our young, so when they're regulators, maybe they can stop this nasty business of lobbying. Lobbying is the worst form, of kind of thing that corporations can do. So the fossil fuel lobby was present at COP26 in higher numbers than many countries. right? Now you're going to keep me while you have to ask one more question or comment.
I just would like to draw your attention to the recent effort by the Permanent Security Council members to drag the climate issue to Security Council, not in the General Assembly, because they want to make it very exclusive and not other countries discussing that, which itself shows that they have no sincerity.
Yeah, and that, which is why, you know, I am better off in the humble space of companies, in the lower space of companies, where I can use my MBA and PhD to better use. You know, governments is not my thing. Politics, you know, it's, and if we rely on the governments and if we rely on things like COP, sir, we are not going to survive even, you know, 50 years from now. You know, so I think we've had a heated discussion. Please, anybody who's interested, do reach out. You know, certainly is an issue that hopefully of great import to all of us. And, you know, let's hope we can make a difference. And let's hope that, you know, I can visit you, Professor Ramachandran, in Kozhikode, and we can, you know, continue such conversations there. I've been wanting to visit for a long time. So as soon as these restrictions are over, maybe we can do something together. All right, Latasri, you have to close it out.
Thank you so much, sir. Yes, thank you so much, sir. You're most welcome to Kozhikode. Sir, I would like to request Nisa sir to offer a vote of thanks and close the session.
Thank you, Latasri. Let me thank Professor Bhattacharya from the bottom of my heart. I'm a struggling researcher in sustainability, and I also teach sustainability. I think he's given me so many insights to take back to the classroom. I really struggle to convince the MBA students. Research is much easier, you know. Convincing the MBA students of sustainability is a big challenge.
Oh yeah, welcome to the clubs. Welcome to the club. Yeah.
Right, and that quotation that you did, right? I think it's a fundamental accounting insight. You know, at least the language we could phrase it that borrowing from the children, right? So that getting the assets and liabilities right. I think that's a fantastic insight. That's something I'll definitely use.
Yeah, yeah, and I look forward to the video if it's going to be available. I would really like to. Right?
Yeah, we will do that. We'll share it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Got to run. Yeah. Okay. Bye bye. Yeah.
Bye. Thank you.
Yep. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.